It was late that evening when I finally came home, drained from a long day of work. The house was quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. I assumed my stepmother, Lisa, had already gone to bed. She was always the lively one, never turning down a drink, especially when my dad was away on business trips, as he often was. Sometimes she drank a little too much, but she'd always been kind to me more like a friend than a parental figure. I remember lying down on the couch, still fully dressed, thinking I'd rest for a bit before heading upstairs. I was too tired to move any further. The couch had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could unwind after a long day, enveloped by its familiar cushions. Before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep. Sometime later, I woke up to a strange sensation. I could sense someone nearby, the rustling of fabric and the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. It was Lisa. She stood there, swaying slightly, clearly under the influence of whatever she had been drinking. Her eyes were unfocused, and her movements slow and deliberate. At first, I was confused. Why was she standing over me like that? Before I could say anything, she sat down on the edge of the couch, her hand lightly brushing against my arm. Her touch was soft, lingering longer than it should have. I could feel the warmth of her skin against mine, and for a moment I was frozen in place. She leaned in closer, her breath warm on my neck, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. It became clear that she was more intoxicated than I had ever seen her. Her eyes held something I hadn't noticed before, something intense, making me feel a mix of confusion, curiosity, and a twinge of fear. "You're such a handsome guy," you know that she murmured, her voice low and husky. Her hand moved from my arm to my chest, tracing lazy circles over my shirt. A shiver ran down my spine as I struggled with how to react. This was Lisa, my stepmom, but the way she was touching me, the way she was looking at me, felt entirely wrong. "Lisa, what are you doing?" I finally managed to ask, my voice thick with sleep and confusion. She hushed me, her fingers now trailing slowly down toward my stomach. "Just relax. You seem so tense." I should have stood up. I should have stopped her right there, but I didn't. Maybe it was the way she was looking at me, or perhaps it was because I was still half asleep, my mind clouded with remnants of my dreams. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something I didn't want to admit to myself. Her hand slipped under the hem of my shirt, her fingers warm and soft as they traced the lines of my skin. My heart was racing, my thoughts spinning in 1,000 directions, but I couldn't seem to move. Her touch was gentle, almost too gentle, as though she was testing how far she could push the boundaries. "You've grown into such a strong, handsome man," she whispered again, her lips dangerously close to my ear now. "I've always thought so. You must know that." I could feel her breath on my skin, the heady combination of alcohol and her perfume filling my senses. There was something so terribly wrong about this, yet something about it kept me frozen. Perhaps it was the forbidden nature of it all, the taboo, or maybe it was simply the way her hands felt soft and inviting against my skin. Before I knew it, she had shifted closer, her body lightly pressing against mine. I could feel her warmth through the thin fabric of her nightgown, her curves soft and alluring. My pulse quickened as she leaned down, her lips brushing against my neck, sending a jolt of electricity through me. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered, her lips moving slowly against my skin. "Just let me take care of you." I knew I should stop her. I knew we were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But the way she was touching me, the way she made me feel it, clouded my mind, making it impossible to think clearly. Every rational thought seemed to slip away as her hands moved lower, her touch growing more insistent. Her lips found mine, and before I could process what was happening, we were kissing. It started soft, tentative, but it quickly deepened. The heat between us grew with every passing second, and my hands, as though acting on their own, found their way to her waist, pulling her closer. As our bodies pressed together, the world around us seemed to fade away, leaving only the intensity of the moment. Her hands roamed over me, exploring every inch, and I couldn't help but respond. My hands instinctively followed hers, exploring the softness of her skin beneath my fingertips. We were completely caught up in the moment, lost to the intensity of it, until suddenly she pulled away. Her breathing was ragged, and her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of desire and something else, something that looked a lot like guilt. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, more to herself than to me. This is wrong. She quickly stood up, swaying slightly as she tried to steady herself. I sat up, my mind still spinning from what had just transpired. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to stop her, to tell her it was okay that I wanted this too. But then the rational part of my brain, which had been silenced for the last few minutes, screamed at me to let her go. I'm sorry, she muttered, her hands trembling as she smoothed down her nightgown. I've had too much to drink. I didn't mean for this to happen. And with that, she disappeared up the stairs to her room, leaving me alone in the dark, heart pounding and mind racing with everything that had just happened. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of it all. What had just taken place between us? Why hadn't I stopped her? And most importantly, what would happen now? I knew that things would never be the same between us, but whether that was a good or bad thing, I couldn't say. The next morning, Lisa avoided me entirely. She didn't mention what had happened, didn't even meet my eyes. It was as if she was pretending nothing had occurred, but the tension between us was so thick, it hung in the air like a fog. I couldn't stop replaying the events in my mind, the way she had touched me, kissed me. No matter how hard I tried to push those thoughts away, they kept creeping back, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Days passed, and the tension only intensified. Every time we were in the same room, I could feel her eyes on me, and I knew she could feel the same from me. Neither of us said a word, but the unspoken tension simmered between us like a ticking time bomb, waiting to go off. And then one night, it did. Lisa had been drinking again, though not as much as that first night. But it was enough to embolden her. She approached me as I sat on the couch just like before, but this time there was no hesitation in her movements. I can't stop thinking about that night, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Can you? I looked up at her, heart racing in my chest. I knew exactly what she meant, what she was asking. And this time I wasn't going to let her leave without addressing it. I reached out and pulled her down onto the couch beside me. This time there was no confusion, no hesitation. We both knew what we wanted, and we weren't going to stop. As our lips met again, the world around us disappeared, and we lost ourselves in the passion of the moment. There were no second thoughts, no regrets, just us, finally surrendering to the desire that had been building between us for so long. But from that night forward, everything changed. The tension that had once been an unspoken undercurrent between Lisa and me was now out in the open, raw and undeniable. We stopped pretending, stopped avoiding each other. Instead, there was an unspoken understanding that something between us had shifted, something neither of us could or even wanted to stop. Every time my dad went away on another business trip, Lisa and I would find ourselves alone in the house together. At first, it seemed innocent enough: dinners, TV, small talk, but each time, the pull between us grew stronger. Like magnets, we were drawn together until we were once again caught up in each other. Before long, our quiet evenings together turned into something far more intimate. The kisses became deeper, the touches more lingering, more daring. We stopped holding back, stopped pretending that what we were doing was wrong. We didn't need to talk about it, both of us knew exactly what this was. Lisa, who had always carried herself with confidence, seemed different when she was with me. There was a vulnerability in her that she showed to no one else, a boldness that surfaced only in our private moments. Her dark eyes, filled with desire, hinted at something deeper that I didn't fully understand. We fell into a routine, a secret life that only the two of us shared. By day, we played our roles, stepmother and stepson, pretending that nothing had changed. But at night, when the house grew quiet and the world outside fell asleep, everything was different. In those moments, we weren't bound by the labels we had been given. We were just two people, caught up in something neither of us could control. The thrill of it all was intoxicating. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every touch was a step closer to crossing a line we both knew we shouldn't. But it only made it more exhilarating. We pushed boundaries, daring ourselves to see how far we could go without being discovered. And with each passing day, it became harder to imagine stopping. Yet no matter how much I tried to ignore it, there was always a part of me that felt conflicted. I was fully aware that what we were doing was wrong. I knew that if my father ever discovered it, it would shatter him, tear our family apart. Yet there was a part of me that didn't care. Lisa made me feel things I had never experienced before, and I wasn't ready to let that go. As the months passed, the guilt started to creep in more frequently. Sometimes I would catch myself staring at my father during dinner, wondering how he could be so oblivious, so unaware of what was happening right under his nose. It felt like I was living a double life, always on edge, waiting for the moment when everything would inevitably collapse. Lisa seemed to pick up on my unease. One night, after another of our secret encounters, she brought it up. "I know this is complicated," she murmured, her voice soft as we lay intertwined on the couch. "But I can't stop. I don't want to stop." My heart raced as I looked at her. I didn't want to stop either, but the weight of what we were doing was becoming unbearable. "What if we get caught?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What if my dad finds out?" She was silent for a moment, her eyes locked onto mine, searching for something. "We won't get caught," she finally said. "We've been careful. We'll continue to be careful." I wanted to believe her, to convince myself that we could keep this secret forever. But deep down, I knew that the truth would surface. It was only a matter of time. And then, one night, everything unraveled. It was late, as always, and Lisa and I were curled up on the couch, lost in each other. We didn't hear the front door open, didn't notice my father's footsteps as he walked into the house, having come home early from yet another business trip. The moment he saw us, time seemed to freeze. Lisa leapt off the couch, her face drained of color, while I sat there paralyzed, heart racing, unable to move. My dad's face was a blend of confusion, rage, and disbelief. For a moment he didn't speak, he just stood there, staring at us, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Then he finally erupted. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice trembling with fury. Neither of us could find the words. There was nothing to say. The truth lay exposed before him, and there was no going back. Lisa attempted to explain, tried to downplay what had happened, but my father wasn't having any of it. He yelled, he raged, calling her every name imaginable. He couldn't even look at me. The betrayal was too much for him to bear. In the days that followed, everything crumbled. My father moved out, leaving Lisa and me behind, surrounded by the wreckage of what we had done. The guilt was suffocating, overwhelming. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling an unbearable sense of shame. Lisa tried to comfort me, insisted that everything would be okay, but I knew better. Nothing would ever be okay again. We had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed, and now we had to face the consequences. Over time, the excitement and thrill that had once defined our relationship dissolved, replaced by regret, guilt, and a profound sense of loss. We had destroyed our family, ruined everything for a few fleeting moments of forbidden pleasure. Eventually, Lisa and I drifted apart. The weight of our actions was too heavy for either of us to bear. My father never forgave me, and I couldn't blame him. I had made a terrible mistake, one that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. What had once seemed like an exhilarating love affair had ultimately turned into a tragedy, leaving behind nothing but broken hearts and shattered lives. If you found this story captivating and want to hear more, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more gripping content.